lending arm, the European Investment Bank, also known as the EIB, is one of the biggest multilateral financial institutions in the world, active in over 160 countries. In Ukraine, the EIB boasts a substantial portfolio of investments, which included in 2020 close to 6.5 billion in signed loan agreements, with roughly 1.6 billion worth of investments in the transport sector alone. All the way from the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, we have Jean Erik de Zagon, head of the EIB resident representation for Ukraine. Thank you for joining us. Mr. de Zagon, at the end of 2020, after a decade of attempts, Ukraine finally adopted a law on river transport and now has a strategy and an action plan on the way. What do you reckon? Will this reform based on EU standards help attract investors in the sector?
Thank you very much. I think we have been closely following what's going on in the inland water transport. And I think that really the work done by the EU and the Minister of Infrastructure for Ukraine to further develop, this way of transporting the country is something we think is very good practice. And we also understand has been done in line with the practice of the EU legislation. It has also been supported by taking assistance, a project called Promoting Transportation Development of the Dnipro River. So that is really something we welcome. And I think the fact that it's also done in line with the EU legislation is something very important for us and will certainly help us to finance in the future. Now, what we really hope is that this legislation will also allow to have much more transport of freight via inland water. It's very good because it's cost saving, it's safer, and it's also much cleaner to alternative road transport. And I think this is very key for us. We want to have safe roads in Ukraine. That's something we also finance in general. But we also want that you have this green transition in Ukraine, that you go for cleaner transport. So they are really an initiative that we welcome very, very much. Now, what we also, we hope that this reform will also help to have, the potential to have foreign players and local players coming into the sector. And that will increase the level of competition and also competitiveness vis-a-vis other mode of transport. And that is very key, that if you have a higher competition, the whole idea is to make it better for the users, better prices, better mode of transport, but that also increases then the competition via roads and air, for example. And then naturally you have more cargo on the inland river. And that's what we want that to achieve in Ukraine. Now, I think also to have in place a strategy on the national level is absolutely key. You will never attract foreign investors, you will not attract also local people if you don't have the feeling that on the highest level of the country, you have a strategy. So that is what we think is important also, to have a strategy right now, and that the ministries, the respective ministers and government now really go forward to implement what has been designed in this law and what has been supported by the EU.
In Serbia, via the Economic Resilience Initiative Fund, you provided 2.7 million euros for a technical assistance grant and a 200 million euro loan for the development of the inland waterway network. Would you envisage something similar for Ukraine as well? Would you be considering future investments in the inland waterway transport?
Yes. I really hope we will discuss it a bit later on, in a year or two, when really thinking about things we have done in Ukraine at that time. So yes, we certainly want to do that. That sector is definitely eligible for financing from EIB. Now, there are some restrictions, and I prefer to put the restriction up front, really. The bank, is very, very keen to go ahead on climate changes. And we have this climate banking roadmap, what we can do. So obviously it has to be in line with this climate agenda the bank has. And that means also, for example, a few things are excluded, even in inland transport, like transport or storage of fossil fuels. So that is something excluded by the bank, but except that, I think we will be very happy to go ahead. Now, I think also we have a large experience, it could be the one you mentioned in Serbia, but we also have projects in Austria, we have projects in the Netherlands and so on, in Germany, where we have done this kind of inland transport. And so we have certainly a good position to support Ukraine in this. We have the experience, we have the expertise, we have the engineers, we have the bankers used to these sectors. We can certainly go ahead on that. Now, always when we have projects very much also involving the public sector, it's important that the scope of the project is very well defined. So when we discuss with ministries, we discuss with agencies, it's important we understand very, very clearly what they want us to do, and then we have to check that that's something that we think is first eligible, taking into consideration the climate constraints, but also that we can do also something good for the economy of Ukraine. That's always key for the bank. We are still a bank in the sense that we there to support development, but we'll only support development if we think it has an economic value for the country, and obviously that the bank will be paid back on its loan by the process, if you want, by the development itself. Now, my last point on this one is that we don't have any doubt the fact there are going to be needs in Ukraine for this kind of support in that sector of inland water transport. What we think is important is that the government very clearly defines priorities, and that's the way we want to work. I mean, we need to have a sector functioning. There's enormous needs financially, but also for people to work on. So I think we need to have priorities. The government, the agencies must tell us these are the priorities you should start with, to putting money, also resources, because there's also resources, of people. You have people have to design this kind of thing, and people have to implement it, and that is not easy. And then obviously, they also limit on how much money you can borrow within a year or so on. So the priority aspect is very, very key for having this. But yes, the bank is certainly happy to repeat the experience we have in Serbia, the experience we have in other countries also within the EU. So I really welcome this, and I hope that, as I said, in the future we're going to discuss what we have done. Thank you.
You are originally from Luxembourg, a country with a solid inland navigation system. Perhaps the Moselle River and its modern infrastructure that plays an important role in international freight transport could be an EU best practice example that may be replicated in the long run in Ukraine. How can we make the Dnipro River great again?
Now, we also look at some figures, if you want. We see that in the EU, we had 558 million transported by this kind of inland water transport last year. That was an increase of about 6 million compared to the years before. In Germany, it's 240 million by itself. Netherlands, 35% of all transport of cargo is done by inland water, and 80% of the bulk cargo traffic. So you have examples everywhere in the EU where you really see that this is something for the future, and therefore can be quite optimistic on what you can do on the Dnipro River. What is absolutely key also, I think, and that is on the strategic level, is that the network of inland water has to be in very good condition, and there must be a clear commitment from the government and the agencies to maintain this good condition. You will not have industrialists planning to use this kind of mode of transport if there are doubts. If they don't feel secure, they will still have the trucks on the roads. So it's very important that you give the government gives a very strong signal to the industrialists that this is going to be maintained, this is going to work in very, very good conditions. And obviously then the bank is also happy to give a strong signal that if this is the case, we will also support this kind of sector by providing financing. Finally, coming back to the Dnipro River, I think it's also important for the bank, and that is key also for the people of Ukraine, that we are sure that the environmental aspects are respected. It's not always that easy to do maintenance and repair and to expand inland water transport. It takes some work to be done and so on. But from the beginning, we have to consider really and be sure that everything is done for that, is really the protection of the environment and of the habitats around the river. And that is important, that is planned very well in advance. So what we think also that if we have the environment protected, if we have the habitats around the Dnipro River protected in advance, and also we have to look at then the global benefit for the climate, which we think is really, really good. So if you want to summarize, yes, what we have done outside the EU, inside the EU, and we see really the demand is there. It's really a growing sector. We think that we can certainly transport this experience to the Dnipro River here. We think that we have to do it in a very careful way, meaning take into consideration the protection of the habitats around and the environment in general of Ukraine. And finally, we think it's globally also very good, both for the economy, but also for the environment. And it's fully then aligned, if you want, with the green agenda designed by your government. So yes, I'm very optimistic on this sector. It needs to be clearly planned. It needs to be carefully prioritized what we have to do. And we also, the third one, we need to be sure that all the environmental aspects are taken into consideration when we do something. And again, I think the bank has a good experience on that. We will not do a project if we don't think that this criteria is fulfilled. And that can also probably help to attract investors. I mean, investors know very well that if EIB is on a project, we have considered all these elements. Is it something economically good? Is it something sustainable? Is it good for the environment? Is how we've been looking into the impact for the neighboring people, I mean, close to the river. And investors know that we've been looking into that. If we say yes, it means we have been looking into that. So I think that will also help to attract investors.
As always, a pleasure, Mr. de Zagon, to talk to you. Thank you very much for finding the time in your extremely busy agenda to talk to us. Much appreciated. Thank you.